Hello and welcome to Getting Started with ORCID. My name is Jack Young. I'm a librarian at McMaster's Health Sciences Library. And today we're going to look at all the steps that you need to know to get you sort of up and running and really help you get started using ORCID. So on the agenda for today, we'll start off just with a brief overview of what is ORCID, followed by why ORCID's important. We'll look at creating an account, and then managing your account and all the associated tasks along with that, from assigning permissions to adding content to linking ORCID with other tools. Finally, I'll recommend some additional resources from the library that you can use to continue to build out your ORCID identifier and profile. So first, what is ORCID? So it's an acronym, and it stands for Open Researcher and Collaborator ID. And really, it's two things. The first, and really most important, is that it's a unique 16-digit number that's used to identify your research outputs across online systems. So essentially, it's a number that's unique to you as a researcher that can be included in all sorts of databases, be they article databases, so where actual published research is deposited, funding databases, so from granting agencies and funding agencies, as well as employer databases, so for employee profile systems or researcher profile systems like the McMaster Expert system we have here at McMaster. What that unique 16-digit number does is it unifies your work across all these multiple places. So that's what this diagram on the right is really illustrating, that the ORCID, that 16-digit number, really sits in the middle and connects your work in all these various places. The second piece that ORCID is it's an online profile where you can keep track of your work. And you have complete control over whether this profile is private, meaning it's completely locked down to only you being able to see it, or if it's completely public, where basically a Google search will return your profile. So depending on your needs, you can use ORCID to actually be a sort of promotional tool for the research and the work that you're doing. And this slide here just illustrates what that profile looks like. And again, it's totally up to you whether or not this profile is public or private. You have complete control over that. But you can see it's just a way where you can sort of store information about your employment, your education, your membership and service, and things like your actual works, your research output as well. So why is ORCID important? Well, we touched on this a little bit, but the real key point here is that it serves as a persistent link between your work in different online systems. So before ORCID, we really could only rely on names to connect our work in all these different systems. And the issue with using names is that the name you publish under could vary. So sometimes you may include a middle initial, maybe you include your full first name sometimes, and other times just one initial. Your name might change over time. And your name is almost certainly shared with at least one other researcher somewhere in the world. And in this global research community, it's becoming harder and harder and harder to actually find somebody that has a completely unique name. So before ORCID, relying on names, it was hard to tell if the J Young in this data set was the same as the J Young over in this data set. So the nice thing about ORCID is that it's completely unique. There's only one person that has my ORCID ID, and so if my ORCID ID is showing up in multiple databases, I can be confident that all that work is coming from me. Because it's such an effective linking tool, we're now seeing many online systems starting to request and even require an ORCID. So what you may find moving forward is that you actually need an ORCID in order to be eligible for certain grants and certain publishing opportunities. So because it's becoming such a useful tool, we're seeing a lot of these database systems where the information could be used require it. And what I anticipate is in the near future, it becoming completely normal practice for us to provide our ORCID alongside our other author details whenever we're submitting a publication or a grant request, or submitting a grant proposal, sorry. The second important piece about ORCID, and the one that's really, most important to the individual researcher themselves, is that it's ensuring you get credit for your work. It makes identifying your research activity really accurate and very efficient. So if you ever need to pull together a report on your publications over the last 10 years, or maybe you want to generate a citation count, see how many citations your work has gotten over a certain time period, metrics like H-index, all these things become really easy to pull when you have a single number that identifies all of your work, because you don't have to go through all the work of identifying your work amongst all the work of those with similar names. And the second piece of this is that the ORCID is yours for life. So some institutions, some organizations have systems that only attach to you when you are within those systems or organizations. ORCID is not like that. ORCID is a global research initiative. So whether you're at McMaster or if you move on from McMaster, your ORCID is going to travel with you. So the one you create today will be yours forever. So that means you don't have to reset everything up anytime you perhaps change jobs or move to a different organization. Okay, so now that we have a bit of a background on exactly what ORCID is and why it's important, we can actually start by creating an account. And creating an account is really easy. So we just go to orcid.org. And we're going to select sign in/register from the top right corner here. And what we're going to do is select register now. And so here it's just going to ask you to provide a little bit of information: your first name, your last name, your primary email. It also leaves space for an additional email, and here I'd recommend including any other email addresses you may have, a personal email address, for example. And this is to the point of how we talked about ORCID is yours for life. So this will mean that you have constant access to your ORCID even if you move on from McMaster. So provide any additional emails as well, and you can see there's actually room to provide multiple additional emails if you like as well. Create a password, and then you get to select your visibility settings, and this relates to that profile that we talked about. So you can select whether you want everyone to be able to see it. That means it's openly searchable on the web. Trusted parties, which is locked down to only other ORCID users that you select, or only me, which means it's completely private. Nobody else can see your profile. It's just used as a way to identify the works associated with your ORCID number. So select whichever one you're most comfortable with. You can always change this once you've created the account, so you're not locked in to one of these options. But select whichever one you're most comfortable with, and then you just need to agree to the terms of use and confirm you're not a robot, and then you can register. So once you've done that, you'll have created your account. And so it's really that easy and that fast. Something you may want to consider after you've created your account is linking your ORCID sign-in to an institutional sign-in. And basically all this means it's going to allow you to sign in using your Mac ID and password in order to get to your ORCID account. It just means you have one less username and password to remember, essentially. So the way we can do that is the next time you sign into your ORCID, select institutional account from up here. And then we can just enter McMaster here in our search box and then click continue. And what that's going to prompt us to do is to log in with our Mac ID and password. And the first time you do this, you're going to see a message that just asks you to confirm that you want to link your ORCID account to your Mac ID. And once you've done that, From then on, you can use that institutional sign-in in order to get to this page here, which is your Orchid homepage. So if you don't want another password to remember, you can link it. You can link your Orchid to your institutional account so that you can log in using your Mac ID and password. And that might be helpful because what you'll probably find is once you set up Orchid, you don't actually have a lot of need to go back into it very often. So it's not like you're going to be in your Orchid profile every week. You may find it useful to just combine the username and password together so that you can use your Mac ID to get on. Okay, so this is what the profile looks like, and this is sort of the back end. So this is the profile that I can edit. And so you can see, I'll just give you sort of a quick tour here. Right here in the top left corner, this is my Orchid number. So this is my unique 16-digit number. And that's what you'll get as soon as you create an Orchid account. And really, if you stop this webinar now and all you've done was created your 16-digit number, that would be a great first step. And what you could do is just moving forward, submit your Orchid number whenever you submit a publication, submit your Orchid number whenever you submit a grant proposal, and just look for that field anytime you're submitting anything and include your Orchid number. That would really be a great first step. What we'll do with the rest of today is look at the other ways that we can manage our profile once we've created it. So the way that we can add publications that we may have already created, or look at research outputs that have already been generated and go back and actually attach this Orchid number to those publications. So as you see, we have our Orchid number here. We can put in as much biographical information as we like. So I've got my employment history, some education, some membership and service information. And you can add sorts of things like your country, your keywords, other website links, and these types of things as well. So you can customize it as much as you want. And again, you don't have to do this. You have the option to make this completely a private profile that nobody else can see. And that's with these buttons along the top. So right now I'm sharing with everyone, but with a click of a button, I can lock it down only to specific trusted individuals, or I can lock it down completely so no one else can see it. So you can make those changes at any time. The other thing that I'll point out is that some of you watching may be interested in not necessarily creating your own Orchid account, but administering the Orchid account of another researcher. And that's quite easy to do as well. So the first thing you'll do is you'll create an account for yourself, just like we just did. And then you'll have the researcher create an account for themselves as well. And from within the researcher's Orchid account, they can go to the account settings. And what they will do is scroll down to trusted individuals, and they'll add your Orchid ID here to make you a trusted individual. And what that basically allows you access to is that back end of their Orchid profile. So it means that you can make any changes that they might need. You can add works, you can remove works, you can link profiles. Once you're assigned as a trusted individual, you'll have that permission to make those changes. And trusted individuals can be revoked at any time or changed at any time. So if things change and somebody else is now in charge of that researcher's Orchid account, those changes can all be made within this trusted individuals area. So it's really straightforward whether or not you are a researcher yourself or you're administering a researcher's account. Okay, so let's go back to the Orchid profile page. And what we're going to work on now is actually adding past publications. So it's likely that you might already have a lot of work already published that you did before you had your Orchid available, right? And so we want to go and we want to link that work to this newly created Orchid profile. And there's lots of different ways that we can do this. And today I'm just going to be focusing on the most efficient ways of doing it. What that means is that we may not grab 100%, every single piece of work that you've ever done, but we're going to grab the bulk of it. And it's going to be a good starting point from which you can kind of add pieces as you go as well. So I'm going to scroll down to works. And the fastest way to add a bulk of past works is to go to the hover over the Add Works feature, and then select Search and Link. And what these options are all they're all sort of tools that can automatically go out and try and find your work in these specific databases or data sets. The one that we're going to focus on today is the one at the very bottom, the Scopus Elsevier linking tool. So Scopus is a large interdisciplinary article database. So it's got tons and tons of articles from academic journals. It's a huge database. It covers everything from science to humanities to engineering. It's got health sciences stuff. It's got just about everything. And so this is going to be a great tool to bring in, again, that bulk of your past work. So we just select Scopus Elsevier, and ORCID's going to ask us if we are trusting this tool. And basically all that we're trusting it to do, all the information is here, but we're trusting it to add work to our profile. So work that we've identified in that database to bring it over into our ORCID profile. So I'm going to select Authorize, and that's going to open this tool here. So this is the Scopus linking tool. And what it has done is it's looked through that database that we talked about, and it's tried to find every instance of my name and gather together, based on name, subject area, and affiliation, sets of articles that it thinks I'm responsible for. And so what we can do is we can scroll through until we find relevant ones that we think might be relevant. So here I see Young Jack. I see McMaster University in Hamilton, so that looks promising. I can see the most recent document, and I can confirm by looking at the title that yes, I was involved in this study, so this one I'm going to want to take a look at. Now my name is pretty common, so depending on what yours is, you may find that there's actually multiple sets here that are actually referring to you. For example, if you moved from one institution to another, it might not group your work together as such. You may have a couple of different ones you select here, and that's totally fine as well. So just look through the list and see any other ones you think might be relevant, select them as well, because we'll have a final chance to confirm or deny certain articles once we move through the process. So for right now, I'm just going to select this one, and I'm going to then scroll down to the bottom and click Next. Here I select a profile name. This is the profile name that they're going to create within Scopus for me. So I'm just going to leave it as Jack Young. Here I'm shown all the articles that were in that set. Now I only have one article, so I just confirm that this is me. If it wasn't, I could select the X, but I'll just select the check to confirm that's me. And again, if you selected, if your profile contained multiple articles, you'd see a big long list of articles here that you could go through one by one and select or deselect. Then I'll click Next. It's just going to ask me to review my final profile. Once more, click Next. It's going to ask me for an email address. This is just to set up my Scopus profile, so I'm just going to provide the email address, send the author ID, and then finally I'm going to send my publication list, which means it's going to bring that work from Scopus over into my ORCID profile. Okay, so we've done that. So now when we return to ORCID, and I'm just going to refresh the page, what we should see is my work that I just added to my works section. Yeah, so here it is. So this has now been added. We see the source is from that Scopus Elsevier linker. So we've now added that record to my ORCID profile. And again, if you had a list of 10 articles, if you had a list of 100 articles, they should all be brought in after you complete that process. We also see here that it has created a Scopus author ID for me over here under my other IDs section. And what that is referring to the unique number that Scopus is using within their database to refer to me as an author. So it's showing that any new articles published in Scopus that fall under this author number will be forever linked to my ORCID number. So again, it's just building these connections between these various sets, and that will help with is with the automation of this process. So now moving forward, when Scopus sees one of my articles pop up, it will be able to send information to ORCID to say, hey, here's a new article published by this ORCID number. Would you like to add this to your works list? So using that Scopus linker is a real fast way to get the bulk of your articles in. If there are other individual ones you'd like to add, you can add them using DOIs, digital object identifiers, or PubMed IDs. So these are both unique numbers, kind of similar to an ORCID, but they relate specifically to documents or articles themselves. So if we go, for example, to PubMed, I can show you a quick example of what it looks like. Just run a search for test. If I select one of these results, what you'll see is that each record within PubMed is going to have a DOI associated with it as well as a PubMed ID. If we just select one of these numbers, so I'm going to take the PubMed ID and copy it. Now if I go to the AdWorks and add PubMed ID, paste it in there and retrieve work details. Oh, that one didn't work. Maybe I'll try the DOI on this one. So I'll AdWorks, add DOI. Let's see if this one works. There we go. So you might need to try a couple. You might need to try both. I'm not sure why it didn't work the first time. But what you'll see is that it automatically imports all the information about that particular record into an ORCID formatted citation. And what we can do is then just select add to list, and that will add the record to the list as well. So you can add individual articles using DOIs or PubMed IDs. This isn't me, so I'm just going to cancel that one. And then the final thing that I'll point out is that you can add articles manually as well, and not only articles. Like you can add any sorts of work. So if you gave a presentation at a conference, if you did a lecture, if you presented a poster, you can add work like that manually. Now this is going to be largely for if you're using the public profile side of ORCID. So if you're actually using it to sort of promote your work. But if that's the case, you can certainly put any sort of type of information in here as well. So if you have intellectual property, then you can specify what it was. Was it a patent, a trademark? And then you can fill out all the additional details here, and that information will appear in your profile as well. So those are sort of the three ways that you can add work to your profile. The search and link option and using the Scopus linker is going to give you a large import of publications really quickly. For individual articles, you may use the DOI tool, where you can add one DOI at a time, or the PubMed ID tool, which is similar to the DOI tool, just a slightly different identifier. And then finally, you could add manually. So if you want to type something out, you can add that work manually as well. So those are the three ways to add works to your profile. The other piece I want to show you is the funding tool as well. So you can also add any grants you may have applied for or received as well. So the way you can add funding is similar to the works. We're going to search and link, and we're going to select the dimensions wizard. So this looks at the databases of a number of different granting agencies and identifies your work, work within those databases. So we can search by your name. Now, personally, I don't have any grants in these databases, so I'm going to actually just do an example where we find by grant title. So if, for example, we want to see grants from the Canadian Institute of Health Research, we can search for CIHR, and we will see a big list of individual grants from that data set. So what you do here is just select one or two or however many are yours, and then so these are all individual grants. You can see individuals' names associated with them. So I'm just selecting one as an example, and then we click next. And what we see is it just asks us to review the grants we've selected, confirm that they're us, and then we can submit to ORCID. And what that will do is automatically update our ORCID profile, just like the Scopus tool did. Okay, so that's a quick way to add funding information to your profile in a similar way that we added Works. The other option here for funding is you can also add manually. So just like the work section, you can type out any information you'd like to add on your ORCID account as well around funding. Okay. So the final way I want to show how to, you can sort of add Works to your account is actually linking your ORCID with your McMaster Experts research profile. So McMaster Experts is a research profile system here at McMaster, and every faculty member automatically has had a research profile in Experts created. And so what you can do is visit experts.mcmaster.ca and then select login, and you can just log in using your Mac ID and password. So as I mentioned, all faculty automatically have one created. If you're not a faculty member, like I myself am not a faculty member, you can request that they create an account for you, and they'll do that. So you can do that through the frequently asked questions link here. So I'm going to log in to my profile. And again, what I'm doing here is I'm going to link this profile that's been created for me to my ORCID account, so that the information in here in Experts can communicate with ORCID and vice versa. So if something new gets added to ORCID, it can be duplicated over in my Experts profile. If something gets added to Experts, it can move over to ORCID for me. So what we can do is go to Menu and ORCID Settings. And all we have to do is just select Register or Connect your ORCID ID. If you weren't logged into ORCID, there it would ask you to log in, but we are already logged in. So all it's asking is to give permission to Symplectic Elements, which is the tool running behind Experts, to have access to your ORCID. And again, the access is needed so that it can send information and receive information from your ORCID record. So we just select Authorize. And now we have established a connection between this profile and ORCID here. And if we change this option here to permitting McMaster Research Profile Manager to read from and write publication to my ORCID account, that will allow the data to move both ways between these tools. So essentially what this will do is this will, again, if something new gets added to ORCID, Experts will recognize that and automatically add it to your Experts profile, and vice versa. If something new gets added to Experts, it will be able to easily transferred over to ORCID. So the way that Experts works, it actually goes through and is set up to try and identify work that is yours. So if you go to the My Publications section, you'll see that it's searching multiple databases to try and find your work. And you can actually go through and claim them as yours or reject them as you're reviewing these tools. But because we have ORCID already connected, it doesn't even need to ask if this publication is mine. It knows that it's mine. So Experts is not something that we at the Health Sciences Library administer, so I don't want to go too deep into the details. There's a lot more that can be, it's a powerful tool, and there's a lot that can be it can be used for. I will highly recommend if we go back to the expert sign-in page at experts.mcmaster.ca, the FAQ page, the frequently asked questions page here can really help you get started, and there's also links to email the support team and submit feedback as well. So if you have any specific questions, it'd be good to reach out to them using this tool. So I'm just going to go back now to our presentation. And this is really the final things I want to leave you with, are the additional resources available to you. So we've created a complimentary guide to this webinar at the Health Sciences Library. So the Getting Started with ORCID guide basically walks through a lot of the same things we covered today, and gets into some more detailed information about any sort of issues you might be running into, as well as privacy around ORCID as well. So it tries to simplify some of the privacy information there as well, while also linking out to the ORCID documentation on that information too. And again, it kind of helps you walk through all the stuff that we covered today. Again, I already showed you the McMaster Expert Support page. So that's the FAQ page for the McMaster Researcher Profile System. And then finally, I'll just promote another guide that we have here at the library that focuses on tracking your research impact. So once you've established an ORCID and you've gathered all of your work into one place, this guide can help you look at options for how you can kind of talk about the impact that your work is having. So it looks at things like how you can generate citation counts, metrics like H-indexes, and these types of things, and how you can sort of talk about the impact your work is having based on how it's being used out there. So that is basically all I wanted to cover today. If you do have any other questions about researcher profiles, about ORCID, or research impact, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to meet and discuss those issues as you see fit. So yeah, other than that, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.